Surprisingly, the political situation in Europe calmed down during the construction of the wall. Little by little, the tragedy for the people of the city became apparent. Parents were separated from their children. The aunt in Köpenick suddenly couldn't be reached anymore. People were caught in the wake of the split that had been cutting through the world of politics for a long time. It broke families apart, broke hearts. The sudden division of the city affected all areas of life. Only the airwaves themselves couldn't be divided, despite all attempts at frequency jamming. For millions of East German citizens, RIAS now really became the credible counterbalance to SED propaganda and the bridge to the West. The American president's visit in 1963 marked a technical first for RIAS. For 7 hours, its reporters gave live coverage of Kennedy's visits, which were intended as a demonstration of American support for West Berlin. Hundreds of thousands assembled in front of the Schöneberg City Hall. They experienced the young president's message firsthand, while their fellow citizens on the other side of the wall received it over the RIAS airwaves.
And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
For the station at the Kufsteiner Straße, the coming years were a time of programming innovation. Not only did the audience in the East want to be informed and entertained, but there was also demand in West Berlin. Here the nights grew shorter, life got faster, and somehow even more cosmopolitan.
(6:10 Uhr ist es inzwischen geworden, meine Damen und Herren. 10 Minuten nach 6 im RIAS Frühprogramm. Was gibt's Neues, Aktuelles und Musik aus Berlin?
Jazz and rock and roll made their way over the Atlantic. The American station was well stocked with both canned and live music, especially from the popular Club 18. This man earned the West Berliners' most enthusiastic applause, Willy Brandt. Once again, he was the right mayor at the right time. His active commitment to the city and his charisma helped the West Berliners through the hard years following 1961. Together with political allies, he began to develop a new policy for dealing with East Germany. Almost single-handedly, he managed to open up a crack in the wall, at least in one direction. At Christmas 1963, West Berliners were permitted to visit their relatives on the east side of the city. Again, it was RIAS that completely changed its programming and provided as much coverage as possible. The late 60s. The situation in the divided city had quieted down. Subsidies from the federal government were now keeping West Berlin alive. As a result, Bonn's influence on faraway Berlin had grown. It became clear to the politicians in Bonn that their demand for a reunited, free Germany had been carried on faithfully over the last 20 years by one radio station, RIAS. Rock music could also carry a message, but it had to be packaged differently than on commercial radio. RIAS 2 received a special building complex and became a station in its own right.
Am Mikrofon der alte Ami Rick Delisle.
The production methods here were a bit more hectic. The young people were more motivated. For them, RIAS 2 could be the springboard into a career that extended beyond Berlin. The first step was integrating computers into their programming planning. They followed the example of American radio stations, which had been producing specialized programming aimed at young people for some time. RIAS 2 developed a broadcasting style that was soon either copied or adopted all over West Germany and even in East Germany. With its 2 channels, RIAS garnered the largest listening audience in both halves of the city. Developments in the media had relegated radio to second place. It had long since been surpassed by television. There was a rumor that the US might once again invest in the media war between East and West. As chief of the US Information Agency under the Reagan administration, Charles Wick was also responsible for RIAS. He remembers.
And there were studies made that demonstrated that most of the people in Germany, and presumably East Germany, got their information by a large preponderance from television, and a much smaller amount of information was derived from newspapers and magazines and even radio. So they too were anxious to be able to pierce the Iron Curtain and have the East Germans learn what was really going on in the democracies and in West Germany with features and news and that sort of thing.
In the fall of '87, the rumors proved to be true. RIAS received its own TV station in the north of Berlin, not far from the wall. Here too, they put together a young team. There were hardly any seasoned TV pros among them, and the station's legal status was ambiguous even in its own country. On top of this, the frontline city of Berlin was an undesirable work location for West Germans. Experience is often replaced by improvisation and the principle of learning by doing. Despite all the objections, it worked.
Einen schönen guten Morgen, meine Damen und Herren.
Und willkommen zur ersten Testsendung von RIAS TV.
Tja, da sind wir also mit der ersten von 8 Probesendungen, die wir jeweils Sonntag von 8 bis 9 Uhr ausstrahlen wollen. Hinterher geht's dann richtig los. Vom 22. August an werden wir jeden Tag für Sie senden.
As in radio, foreign correspondence studios were set up. One was located in Bonn for direct coverage from the main switchboard of federal German politics. It was originally designed for sending live reports to Berlin. And the studio in Washington's D Street is also right in the middle of the action, located halfway between the White House and the Capitol building. The airing hours were unusual for German TV standards. RIAS TV broadcast a news-oriented breakfast program. Work began at 3 a.m., and at 6 o'clock they went on the air. Like the American CNN, there was a news report every half hour with a weather report and the latest in sports. In 1989, the 3 RIAS stations were especially busy. The cut through the barbed wire signaled the end of an era. And once again, the station's high standard of journalism was of utmost importance, especially to the people of East Germany. The scene of the action was once again right at their front door. November the 9th, the night the wall came down. RIAS reporters could finally make contact with their listeners and viewers without the interference of the socialist regime. This was an extraordinary experience for the RIAS team. And on this night, no one stopped to ask, if the Brandenburg Gate opens, will RIAS close? No one had time to ask either. The events in East Germany came one after the other. The reporters traveled throughout the country, reporting for and about their fellow countrymen. On location at last. As RIAS documented the events of reunification, its voice stood out in the concert of mass media. It accomplished its mission of disseminating information and thus finished what it had set out to do, serving as the voice of truth in the middle of the hypocritical German socialist state. The problems of German unity are still beyond anyone's grasp, but one thing was clear, RIAS had a problem. RIAS, too, is privatized. It's no longer the great young people's radio station. Now it's in the hands of several enterprises who are engaged in a bitter struggle for ratings and advertising. What's left is RIAS, shrunken to the proportions of the 70s and integrated into a station called Deutschland Radio. It's becoming a national radio station, together with Deutschlandfunk from Cologne and DS Kultur, a vestige of the East German state radio. What remains is the empty Studio 7 at Kufsteiner Straße. Music will never again be produced here. There's nothing left now but the slightly melancholy memory of an unusual German-American radio and TV station that not only guided a people through the history of their city and country, but also became a part of it.